I'm Beck and welcome to my to be read pile that I've got for my library. I use the Libby app, and even though I've got most of a handle on my physical TBR, I see a lot of books that I'm interested in, but I don't know whether the tone of them or the writing style of them will suit me, and I can't afford to go out and buy everything, even though I really wish I could. So I've got a library TBR and I thought that I would share it with you today. Some of these I will potentially buy in the future. Some of them I've just got on here because I wanted to try them out before I might buy them, and that kind of helps me rule them out. So the first book on my list is Hench, and I realized I've added a lot of these books because of the vibes, and I don't necessarily know the synopses of all of them, but I know the general gist of them, which again is why I've got them on a library TBR, because if I physically owned them, I'd know a little bit more than just kind of general stuff about them. So Hench is the first book on this list, and I believe it follows a woman who lives in a society where there are superheroes. A superhero didn't help her, or the system of superheroes didn't help her when she was in trouble, and so she decides to rebel against the whole system and becomes a supervillain, I believe. But I love an angry woman rebelling against a system, so that's why I added it. I also really enjoy superhero stuff, and this seems like a subversion of that, so I feel like I'll enjoy this one, but it really is going to hinge on the writing style for it, because I've seen people love it, fall middle of the road, and then hate it. So I really hope that I'm going to enjoy it, and I will find out in several weeks' time, because a lot of people want to read it as well. Then I've got an audiobook on this list, and that is Magic Strikes, which is the Ellen Andrews sequel. It is the third book in obviously the Kate Daniels series, and this is an urban fantasy, an adult urban fantasy following Kate Daniels. In the first book, her mentor, she's an orphan, but her mentor is murdered, and she's tasked with, or not tasked with, but decides to solve the murder. There are were creatures like werewolves and a miscellaneous bunch of other creatures too, and I've liked so far the lore and the myth in here. I like the world building, and I like Kate Daniels as well, so I thought why not continue them. But I don't have, again, the money to constantly go out and buy books all the time. Even though I know I like these, all the costs add up, and I'm like, do I eat groceries or do I buy books? And so sometimes I have to feed my mouth and not my mind. It's just the way it is. So I've gone and put the audiobook on hold, and if I like the audiobook style, I might continue, but maybe I'll just buy them physically and just slowly get through the series, or maybe even my local library will have the physical copies. But I've really been struggling with my library. It hasn't had a lot of the titles that I've wanted, so maybe this will be similar, but I'm really not sure. I need to just join a few libraries around me, and that way I'll have access to more than one catalogue. I think that might be my solution. Then I've got Light from Uncommon Stars, which is about a 2-week wait. I was lucky that as soon as I added this to my holds list, they were like, we have another copy at our library that people are reading. So I'm getting this twice as fast as I thought I would be. And I know that this is a sci-fi, and it potentially has a sapphic romance at the center of it. Beyond that, I don't know, but I've been chasing books that are science fiction or fantasy that have more queerness in them, because to me, queer characters are just more interesting. They've done a lot more internal reflection. They've developed themselves further than, say, a straight character might have maybe. Anyway, I just find them a little bit more developed because they've had to do that mental and emotional groundwork already to get them to a point of understanding themselves, whereas a lot of characters that I read about that aren't queer necessarily haven't had to do that kind of mental gymnastics and that reasserting of identity that's a very internal struggle. So I'm somebody who loves character and internal struggle, and so that's why I kind of gravitate towards queer books. So I'm looking forward to trying this out and seeing if I like it, but again, everything really hinges, like I said before, on the style of it, so I'm hoping I like the style. This is an ebook as well, not an audiobook. A lot of the books that I reserve at a library are audiobooks, because with my commute to work I kind of go through them a little bit quicker, and I find it really hard to read on a screen after looking at a screen all day for my job and then doing video stuff on my own screen as well. So it's just a nice break to have an audiobook, but sometimes an ebook will call to me. Then this next one was recommended to me by my friend Marie, which is a 4-hour audiobook, also sci-fi, also sapphic, and the title is Even Though I Knew the End. That's it. I don't know anything about this, I'm sorry. Then I've got a short one on here, and that is Galatea by Madeline Miller. I've read her other works, so Circe and then The Song of Achilles, and I thought I don't love the author enough to go out and purchase more of her work, but I am generally interested in the Olympian gods and stuff, also Arthurian legends, so any great recommendations I will appreciate. So I've gone and reserved Galatea. It's got many weeks wait because obviously it's by a very well-known author. It actually came through early, and because I was reading a bunch of other stuff at the same time, I made my reserve further down the track, so I might come to regret that because now I'm like, I have more space to read things and I've got several weeks wait on Galatea, so mistakes were made, but eventually I will circle back to reading it. Up next, we've got a book by Octavia E. Butler, and I've seen a lot of discussion about her. I primarily watch booktube content from Emily Fox, and I know that Octavia E. Butler is one of her key favorite authors. And so I've got Parable of the Sower as an audiobook on my library TBR because I thought I really want to try this author, but I don't really know necessarily where to start. And I also love that dystopian genre, but I know that Emily Fox's reading taste leans sometimes into more literary, and with the themes that Octavia E. Butler tackles, it's a lot of feminism, oppression, and just dystopian darkness and tension. And so sometimes I'm like, I will devour that, and other times the writing can just be a bit overpowering for me. So I've decided to do the audiobook of Parable of the Sower and just see what happens. I have no recollection about what the next book is, so sorry for being so chaotic, but it's called A Touch of Darkness, and this might be like a dark fantasy or a fantasy romance or something. I'm so sorry, this is ridiculous. I just genuinely have no idea. I should have looked it up before I started this video, but again, chaos. The next one you might have seen though, and that is Half a Soul, which is a cozy fantasy story, and it's about a character who is brought up in like an Elizabethan kind of society. I think it's removed from real world, and the culture she's brought up in requires a lot of socializing, but she kind of shuts it down. She doesn't want much part of it, to be honest. And when she talks to people, she's very blunt. She doesn't kind of become flowery with her words so that people don't mix meanings up with each other. And I believe the love interest is a sunshine. So she is very much the grumpy, he is the sunshine. And it's apparently quite a wholesome book, but I'm like, I read another cozy fantasy book, A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, and I ended up putting it down, and a lot of people hyped it up, and also hype up T. Kingfisher as an amazing author. And from what I've read, I didn't love what I saw, so I'm hoping that that's not the case with Half a Soul. Also not by T. Kingfisher, so completely different styles. So I'm really hoping that this cozy fantasy really hits home for me, because I really love cozy fantasy as a subgenre and I want to read more of it. But again, why do I have to be so poor when all I want to do is buy books? One more that I'm excited about that is kind of cozy fantasy but also rom-com romance is Witch You Gonna Do, which is a witch falling in love with a demon, I think, which is, I imagine, kind of similar to Witch Please. So in Witch Please, a witch falls for a mundane who has no idea about magic, but in this it seems like there are very much enemies to lovers with the witches and the demons, and they don't really understand each other, and then obviously forces collide. So I'm looking forward to seeing that get developed. Now this one is on here because I don't really read a lot of nonfiction, and this audiobook wasn't really long enough for me to justify spending a lot of money on it, and that is Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton, which he reads himself as an audiobook, so I feel like it will be incredibly immersive in that respect because he is telling his own story and he knows it obviously very intimately. So I think it will be quite informative, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about his life, which is probably a very massive roller coaster given that he was a child star and he's obviously a household name now. So I'm looking forward to reading that, but it's more than like 6 weeks, so I don't think I'll read it very soon, but it's a couple of hours long, so I feel like I can get through that pretty quickly. And even though I don't really read nonfiction very often, it is a book that relates very nostalgically to my childhood because obviously I loved Harry Potter, and obviously he is a key actor in Harry Potter, so I thought I'm going to enjoy reading something from his perspective and tone of voice because I enjoyed seeing his career develop as I grew up, so that will be really cool to see. But I don't really read much in that kind of category in general. This is a very special case, so because it's a special case I'm making allowances for it, but I don't really reach for nonfiction, unfortunately. Now the last 3 on this list are on here because I went through a massive identity crisis. I was like, the books on my TBR pile physically don't match with what I want to read now, because I literally just finished The Last of Us season 1 and I was like, I need more zombie content and more apocalyptic stuff. And so that's what I want to put on hold from my library. The first one would be Zone 1, which is apparently following a soldier of the military as he's trying to clear out this particular Zone 1. And it's supposed to be a safe zone, but I think it obviously is not a safe zone. And this is a while after the apocalypse has hit. So I think there is a little bit more semblance of order than there would be had it just broken down. But I think it follows him and psychologically what has happened to him regarding obviously PTSD during the apocalypse and what he's doing in this situation now. So I think it will be a really introspective kind of story. At least I'm hoping that's what it will be. So I really love psychological apocalyptic stories, especially with a few zombies that you can get the action in sometimes. So that was definitely added to my TBR very, very quickly. The second apocalyptic book that I added to my library TBR, and also the second last book on this TBR video, is called Manhunt, and this is about trans and non-binary characters in the zombie apocalypse, because we don't really hear much about these kinds of characters and this kind of pocket of queerness in apocalyptic stories. The only story that has kind of centered queer storylines for me was Book of the Unnamed Midwife, which is one of my favorite apocalyptic stories ever. I adored it so much, and the sequels follow trans main characters, which is really nice. They're more like companions rather than a direct series, but it definitely relies on prior knowledge. So if you want to read them all the way through in order. So Manhunt is on my TBR because I wanted more stuff like Book of the Unnamed Midwife, and I haven't really got it. I'm really kind of hesitant about this one because I've seen a lot of reviews that were only like 3-ish stars, and that's middle of the road. Okay, would recommend, but not a new favorite in my book. And so I'm like, will I end up loving this, or is this going to be very angry and grotesque to the nth degree that I get taken out of the story? I'm not sure, but there's only one way to find out. And then the last book on this TBR also came up when I was searching for apocalyptic stories, although this is more science fiction based than anything else. Although I guess apocalyptic and zombie fiction falls as a subcategory under science fiction anyway, but this is more like aliens, outer space, apocalyptic fiction. Anyway, Children of Time is the book that I'm talking about. I need to just stop talking around it and actually tell you the title. This is about I think human race moving to a different planet situation, but this planet was already colonized by aliens, and it might have a survival aspect in there of the people who landed trying to survive and then maybe getting killed off. I don't know. It was honestly enough to hook me because it seems like there is almost like a monster aspect of fantasy and sci-fi in there, and naturally a survival situation that forces all this tension and drama of these characters coming together with trauma and trying to survive. I've also seen this book series and this book in particular hyped up a lot, and for the longest time I was like, I don't need to add that to my TBR. I have no reason why I had made that decision. And now I'm like, I read the synopsis and this sounds amazing. Why was I ignoring them for so long? So now it's on my library TBR, and I will probably read a few pages of the ebook and then decide to go and buy it myself. So there you go, that is my library TBR. A bit chaotic, I'm sorry, and I couldn't give the synopsis of everything, but let me know if any of these books are also on your TBR, and maybe if you've read them, let me know if you like them or not. I would love to know. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments. Leave me a purple heart if you got this far, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.